Welcome back to the Occult Rejects. Today, we're diving into a book that is not just about the X-Files as a television show, but about the X-Files as a cultural event, a conspiracy artifact, and a map of the late 20th century paranoia. We're talking about the XF Ultra, The Deepest Dive, the X-Files, Conspiracy Culture, and the National Security State by Christopher Knowles. Even though the title alone, you can see what kind of territory the book is moving through, not just aliens, monsters, and FBI files, but conspiracy culture, myth, symbolism, state secrecy, and the machinery of modern belief. Knowles himself frames the book as a work of cultural criticism and historical and artistic analysis, not just fandom, which is important because this is clearly meant to go much deeper than a simple episode guide. Christopher Knowles comes into the subject as somebody who has been circling these themes for a long time. The front matter shows a body of work already steeped in pop culture, hidden meanings, comics, rock history, and symbolic analysis. And in the introduction, he makes it clear that this book grew out of decades-long obsession with the X-Files. He even says he co-wrote the complete X-Files back in 2008 and describes his own background as one shaped by paranormal media, punk culture, symbol spotting, and proximity to people tied to the national security world. So this is not a detached outsider looking in. This is somebody who sees the X-Files as one of the great modern myth-making engines of our time and who wants to trace everything packed inside it, from UFO lore and black projects to myth, religion, human experimentation, and the deeper symbolic architecture of the series itself. What makes this book interesting is that Knowles is not arguing that the X-Files was just a hit show with creepy monsters and great atmosphere. He's arguing it became something much larger, a lens for reading the fears, conspiracies, obsessions, and hidden tensions of the modern world. And when you look at the table of contents, you can see the ambition immediately. 1970s conspiracy thrillers, UFO conspiracy theories, human experimentation, mythology, the Bible files, the Gnostic X-Files, and then season by season breakdowns tied back into all of it. This book is trying to explain why the X-Files hit so hard, why it stayed alive in people's minds, and why it still feels connected to the world long after the original moment that produced it. All right, now, enough out of me, and before we introduce this guest, let me introduce everybody else that is on the show with us, all the other rejects. And Kaiva. What is going on, Kaiva? It's good to have you back on. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on. Nice to meet you, Chris. I do traditional astrology as well as tarot. You can find me at 11kaivarose33.com or Kaiva Rose on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Good to have you.
No, thank you so much for making it. And my man, Headless Giant, what is going on, sir? How are you?
How you doing? You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter, and on YouTube at The Headless Giant. I'm also on Rumble right now, so check those out. I'm happy to get into it. I've got the trialogue on Sunday with Ethan Indigo and Ricardo Calvario. I'm probably going to be doing a live with Ricardo this Sunday because he's down in Wisconsin, so we're going to have a good time doing that. So check that out. Thank you.
Nice. You know what? Joey from Library of the Untold, actually, they're building a studio, and he actually asked me if I might be able to go down there and actually record on his show. So that would be actually pretty fucking cool, man. Yeah. Brandon, my man, what is going on? How are you?
What's up, everyone? So glad to be back. It feels like it's been forever since I've been on the Reject, so it's wonderful to see you, Nick, again. Yeah, Christopher, I'm so happy to be on this panel with you. Like I told you beforehand, I've been following you for years and years. Secret Sun blog, everyone should go head on over there. Lucifer's technology is something that just cracks open the code of all things, I'd say. Quite brilliant. You can all follow me on Megas in the Media, YouTube, X, all the things, Instagram. We're doing it, and we're doing it all the time. Yeah, I'm just really excited about this evening. X-Files is one of my favorite shows. Season 3, episode 20 really breaks down a lot of what's been going on in the world, I think. So I hope we get into that a little bit today. Yeah, I'm just excited to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Brandon. It's been a minute. It's nice to see you back. And Jen the Ninja, what is going on? How are you, Freda?
What's up, boss, Mr. 93? I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Obviously, Kaiva, I've said this publicly on Brandon's show, but one of my favorite astrologers, probably one of the few that I really respect. So it's awesome to be on a panel with her. Brandon, of course, my erstwhile co-host on our Monday lives, which we've been doing a kind of gonzo radio, which fits right in with my show, which is Threshold Saints, which is serial experiments and speculative ontology. You can find it on Substack is my best landing platform, but also Spotify and Apple. thresholdsaints.substack.com. Today, I'm dropping an episode with Paul Frederick of the Demonosophy podcast, and we're discussing sort of the return to Zoroastrianism, or what that will look like, of course, with my co-host Solar Exile. And I am really excited to be on a panel with Chris. This is not my first time being on a panel with Chris. It was a couple of years ago on End of Days Radio, but definitely think we're going to have a really interesting discussion. I'm happy to listen and learn. And I want to shout out Eros in the chat and also Vanessa. So what's up, guys? And the Grey Lodge represent. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
That's awesome. Nice. Thank you very much. I appreciate you making it. And finally, Christopher, please let everybody know, like, what's up with you, wherever they can find anything that you want to promote, any links, social media. What do you do?
Well, I have, I've been on secretsun.blogspot.com since 2007. I've got the Secret Sun Substack, and I've got the Secret Sun Institute for Advanced Synchromysticism on Patreon, and all three of those. Basically, they're all very active. There's some cross posting, but a lot of times you'll get unique information on each particular platform. But, things have been rocking and rolling, particularly on the Patreon since 2021 now. So coming up on 5 years. Substack opened last year. And I have a YouTube channel, but I don't really do much on it. I just sort of repost things. Most of the materials that I will upload will be excerpts or reposts from materials that I've done for, the Patreon and the Substack. So, and I'm doing books. I've got, of course, we're talking about XF Ultra, and I'm working on a sequel to my 2019 novel, He Will Live Up in the Sky. And I'm really trying, one of my plans is to get both the original book and the sequel now done on audiobook for people, which is going to be a bit of work. You can't AI those kind of things, nonfiction books, because there's so much inflection and emotion and so on and so forth. So that's going to be once I get the book done. I'm about halfway through it now. Once I get the book done, I'm going to be hopefully launching a Kickstarter or whatever to raise the funds to get a really good reader. And both books are very much in the vein of, the things that you talk about, that I talk about, that I blog about, that I write books about, so it's all in the same family. I'm not like writing like a romance novel or something, or historic. It's all relevant, processing the same kind of information. So
that's cool. Yeah. You do have other stuff that you have written that I didn't mention, but I've got
a number of books. You can just there's a bunch of Chris Knowles's, just to let you know. So I publish under my full name, Christopher Knowles. So if you want to look me up on Amazon, just make sure, because there's actually a fairly well-known author who does sort of like military fiction named Chris Knowles. So there you go. There you have it.
Thank you very much, Chris. I again appreciate you coming on. And everybody go check out his stuff. I highly suggest it if you don't know who he is. If you don't mind, I would like kind of if you could, for the listeners, and I really enjoyed, I thought it was pretty interesting. Maybe because of my age, maybe we're close to the same age. I just thought it was interesting for the way that you put the context of, like, before September 10th, 1993, how your life was and how you saw the world and what you were into before you, hit this obsession.
I was primed and pumped, believe me. I was there September 10th, 9:00 with bells on. I was counting the minutes. Well, I mean, one of the reasons being is that my wife and I were really big, like Fox TV, like when it was like Simpsons and, I'm embarrassed to say this, but like Beverly Hills and Melrose Place and Grounded for Life. I mean, there was a a lot of shows that we were watching at the time. And we were on Saturday nights, we had this ritual where we'd order pizza and get beers and watch Cops, America's Most Wanted, and then the show called Sightings. I don't know if anybody's familiar.
I remember
with
Sightings.
You remember Sightings, right? Yes.
Yeah,
Sightings was sort of this like paranormal news magazine show, sort of like 60 Minutes for high weirdness. And we watched, that was our nights. That was our Saturday nights. So we started seeing the trailers or the promos or whatever you want to call them for the X-Files. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. I'm just like, and the interesting thing too, is that since they use the same font, that sort of stressed typefighter font, I thought that it was a spin-off of Sightings. Like I thought the X-Files was going to be a spin-off of Sightings, which is kind of interesting. And it was all like, it was all going to be about UFOs. So just to back up, I mean, if any of you guys are younger or your viewers or listeners are younger, this was a time like early 90s when like UFO culture was huge. I mean, there would be like conventions, UFO conventions somewhere, like almost every weekend. And this is like in the wake of like Bob Lazar, and Area 51 was a huge thing.
Bob Lazar.
Communion was a few years before. And then you had films like Fire in the Sky. And it was just, it was a much more innocent world, we a lot of us took it more seriously maybe than it should have been taken, but it was really big. And this is also, I had just gotten on the internet shortly before the X-Files began. So there's this whole thing like the X-Files grew up with the internet. I got on the internet, I think almost like maybe a week before the X-Files premiered. And it was like, I can't even begin to tell you what it was like for me. I mean, this is like little 24, bits per second modem, right? It's a little archaic thing, right? But it was just so intoxicating. It was just like, I swear to God, it was like somebody injecting opium directly into my brainstem. It was just incredible. And it was like that for a while. I really miss those days. I really do. But I discovered like alt conspiracy and all this kind of stuff on Usenet, which I had never really been exposed to. But at the same time, I was really into like 60 greatest conspiracies of all time. And a couple of years later was the big book of conspiracies. I mean, this is really the dawn of the age. And this is like apocalypse culture. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with any of these books or whatever. But I was, there was actually a store in New York called See Here, which started out just selling like rock magazines, but then they sort of branched out and they there was a lot of conspiracy stuff. I mean, there was like research and a mock press and all these kind of things. And it was really like, it was brand new to me, I mean, even though I'd watched like In Search of and all this kind of, all this conspiracy movies from the 70s, obviously. 3 Days of the Condor, Parallax Files, so on and so forth. Or Parallax, Parallax. Oh, not the Parallax View. I'm getting confused here. So anyhow, I was just really, I was ready for it. I just was prepared for it. And that first episode just totally blew me away. But then the second episode just like freaked me out. Like I really thought like I was getting put on like a watch list just for watching the show. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the second episode, but it was sort of like their Area 51 episode. But the whole thing was just like so incredibly paranoid. It was like the most paranoid thing I think I'd ever seen on TV before. But like I said, I mean, I grew up in the 70s, so I saw Capricorn 1 at the movies, I mean, all these kind of things. So I sort of had the same cultural background that the writers and the producers of the show had, even though I was a few years younger than most of them, but, I was ready for it. So it was really exciting. And I still think that the X-Files pilot is probably the greatest pilot ever made. As far as like, this is the universe, this is the world, it's like just completely establishing the world and setting the template. And just setting the table for everything that was about to come. I mean, if you just go back and watch, particularly those first 2 episodes, it's just amazing how well they stand up.
Thank you. Thank you. I know you do mention something in here, and I just kind of wanted to maybe have you kind of give a little bit of a background on this word, hyperstitious. Because you do
Hyperstition.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. I thought it said superstitious.
Well, yeah, I might have used it as an adjective. Yeah. So hyperstition is this. Was it? I think it might have been Nick Land who came up with it. Maybe it was. I think it was him.
Yeah, Nick. It was the that sort of crew out of the new school for sure. There's a little debate about it. But yeah, I agree. I would say, yeah, I think it's fair to say, like, epistemologically, Nick Land.
Okay, good.
He's the one that popularized it anyway.
So it's this whole idea of, using data almost as like as a form of magic, It really is a paranormal science in some ways, I guess you would say. But it has to do with, there's a line in a great X-Files episode where it says, we predict the future, and the best way to predict the future is by inventing it. And that to me is kind of how hyperstition basically works. You put all these memes and concepts and strange vocabulary and all these kind of things out there. And this is very much obviously an internet-based kind of thing from that Wild West period of the early 90s. And you start to change the course of reality through hyperstition, through introducing these concepts and ideas and like I said, memes and symbols and all these kind of things in a directed way. And it becomes almost like the sort of push and pull with external reality. Okay. And if Jen, am I on track there? I mean, is that?
I think you do a great job, Chris. I'm not going to correct you on it. I think that that's exactly what it is. It's like a mimetic magic. It's chaos magic, a little left-hand path informed. It's using memes, Kino as the Zoomers call it, as I also call it. Creating. I think you said it perfectly. It's the creation of sort of new words, the syncretism of words itself. But all poets and all magicians, like I always say, Austin Osman Spare. I think he is the sort of like the OG, at least, kind of this kind of magic. I don't think that they're pulling too far away from the, Western magical tradition with hyperstition. I think it's just maybe a more literary or literate way to articulate this exactly the same thing.
Well, I think, the whole chaos aspect of it, I think is, you've put your finger on it there, because the best example, I think, of hyperstition would be the whole Keck thing from 2016 and meme magic. And so on. So, and then there was that, rather underwhelming X-Files revival that same year in 2016. So that would be the whole Keck thing, 4chan, and all that kind of thing. So, but it's something that I've been thinking more and more and more about. This is something that we can discuss in another episode, maybe. But the two things that I say are that, as far as synchromysticism is concerned, which I think is sort of the redheaded cousin of hyperstition in some ways. It's sort of the poor relation of hyperstition. But I think the X-Files, in my mind, and the work that I've done, and I think the work that I put in the book bears this out, I think it's the second most potent synchromystic generator that I've ever seen, and that I can even imagine. I don't think you could have something with that kind of power at any other time, like not even now. That time in history when you still had a mass culture. We don't have a mass culture anymore. When the internet was new, it's not new anymore. You had all these preconditions that allowed something that was just pumping all this incredibly potent symbolism into the culture, and it changed the I mean, I think it changed the course of history, and that might sound a little overambitious in some ways, but I really do believe it. I think that it changed the way people thought. Like, you wouldn't have people like Alex Jones and Mark Dice in the late 90s without the X-Files. I mean, those people would just would have never gained any traction. They would have just seen as, you know, as the way the people like that were seen prior to the X-Files, is just completely marginal, irrelevant kooks. And it was because the X-Files had made this whole worldview so alluring, and I think alluring is really the term, that it gave, you know, conspiracy culture and all the rest of it a push that I can't imagine would have ever happened without it. Okay.
That's interesting that you're saying that. I just want to ask real quick, maybe your opinion and other people's opinion. Could you see the Epstein files kind of like being kind of redone again? Because like that's now giving people who were like, maybe like, I've known a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people that really, that was their conspiracy awakening now.
Well,
so like, I feel like
yeah.
it's putting, I also have a problem with believing it might be real, but I do see that now it's like, it is putting shit that was considered a year or two ago fucking fanatic thinking into like, oh no, it's real.
Yeah, no, it's true. But I also think there is a lot of hyperstition there. But I also think that Epstein himself was very aware of the concept of hyperstition and the concept of meme magic. You know, he was hanging out on all these boards. I mean, didn't he have? Am I correct? Did he have like a 4chan account? I know he had a Discord account.
I think so.
So I mean, he was tuned into all these ideas and so on. He was following all this stuff. So I think it gets to be very murky. But I do think one of the main objectives behind the Epstein, whatever it is, I mean, whether it's a psyop or hyperstition or conspiracy, whatever you choose to label it as, and it's going to depend on how you perceive it, right? But I think, and I said this and I got in trouble for saying this, but it's like, I think the idea was like to push this concept, to push this notion in the public mind that elite pedophiles are interested in post-pubescent girls, when in reality, elite pedophiles are almost exclusively interested in prepubescent boys. Okay. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And I think that people have gotten sort of misdirected. You know, I think it's very convenient for a lot of people who are involved in elite predation, let's just call it, to think, oh, well, it's just, you know, it's these 16-year-old girls who, you know, they would have gotten in trouble somehow anyway. You know, they were just, you know, from trailer parks and they're all headed for trouble. You know, they probably would have just been like working the strip in Pensacola or something, whatever. And then that's shifting the focus away from what it really should be on, which is that it's always been, and you read this in religion, in history and myth, it's always been focused on prepubescent boys. And this might be like a little bit of a, you know, maybe this is a little bit too much of a strong drink for people, but I really do believe that. And I think,
well, I thought that was something weird about the files. I was like, where's the boys? It's like, this is all girls. Like, I did actually find that weird. I was like, it was, yeah.
Well, that's the thing that gets my hackles up. That's the thing that raises my suspicions about the true nature of this whole operation. And like I said, I mean, it's like, I think most people take it for granted. If you read the newspaper, even, that, you know, girls under the age of 20, you know, say between the ages of 14 and 20, are very highly sought after for prostitution, whether it's in sort of this gray market prostitution in Las Vegas, or Los Angeles, wherever, whatever you're talking about. And I think it's just like the problem that I had, and this gets to vocabulary and definition. Epstein, as we know it, was not technically a pedophile. He was an ephebophile. He was interested in adolescents. Those are two different phenomena. You might have been following this horrible situation in Texas, right? With this FedEx driver who kidnaps this girl. See, that to me is pedophilia to me is also very, very much a misnomer, because really what it is pedopathy, because it always leads to violence. The children and the materials that they consume always get younger and younger and younger. It always becomes violent. All right. It doesn't always end in murder, but violence is really at the core of it, because it is a moral sickness. Okay. And I think redefining that is just some sleazy old banker from New York who has a taste for 16-year-old blonde girls from Florida doesn't really do the real problem. Doesn't do justice to what the problem really is all about. Okay. So I'm sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
No, you're good. You're good. No, it's just
you'll see a lot of this in the X-Files too. I mean, a lot of episodes. One episode that I'm thinking of in particular, and there's, since this is meant for public consumption, we won't get into who I think he was really going after. But there's an episode called Red Museum, which is one of what I call the nonfiction episodes, and it's about this town where they're injecting the cattle with weird genetically modified drugs and so on, but they're also injecting the kids. And it's, a pedo sort of blows the cover on the whole thing. But as I said, I mean, he's interested in young boys, you know what I'm saying? And that's really, again, I mean, this is, maybe a little bit too dark for noontime on a Friday, but that's just the way it is. And that's the problem that I do have with the Epstein materials, is that I think that it is a huge distraction for what the problem really is.
There's I do want to add to that, and also kind of like take a paradigm shift. But in that, the whole idea of Chris Carter and X-Files kind of blowing this thing open for like an Alex Jones and everyone to do their thing, I completely agree. And it's quite fascinating how then that is itself a paradigm shift in the collective consciousness of the media marketing / human angle, to be able to see something and then for it to like basically plant seeds of people who are already on the outskirts, and then allow it for them to open up these radio shows and things like that. So I do find that to be it's an easy way to see how modern myth is interactive in human experientiality, and how it's not just myths are outside of us and humans and the experiences we have are outside of us, but they're deeply integrated. And as well, you then get this inversion with what you were just talking about, with how do you traumatize and create traumatized humans, is to start at a young age, no matter who they are, boy or girl. But it's really fascinating that then in the military industrial mechanized oligarchical parasite class, that how do you build up people in vulnerable states? Just like in the LSD experiments, you put somebody in a vulnerable state. It doesn't always have to be with drugs. It can be with these lower circuits that, sex and all these different things, and put them through terrible emotions. And then you can implant these circuitry, these new programs, put them into Hollywood, put them into the public sphere. And it's almost like they're walking egregores themselves. They're walking dark shades of the night of the kleptotic spirits, as then they go and they push up against everybody else, and so that's a fascinating discussion. So I just want to add that to, it is how you create an inverted myth for our culture to follow. And then at the same time, be able to cover it up and say, well, that's just all fantasy, because it just happened in a TV show doesn't mean it's happening in real life. And so there's just so many layers.
Well, there's also a liminality to it as well. Okay. because the whole thing is that Chris Carter said it has to be real. It's only scary if it's real. But to me, the episodes, I'm not afraid of the episodes of, vampires or whatever, right? Mutants, zombies. The episodes of the X-Files that really scare me are the ones that I call the non-fiction episodes, the episodes about mind control, the episodes about human experimentation, right? I mean, there's a whole host of those, right? Those episodes are the ones that really get under your skin. And I'd mentioned that second episode, Deep Throat. Now, if you watch that actually, if you watch the first two episodes, and I write this in the book, there's no reason to believe that any of this is aliens, that anything that you're seeing is anything but the military. And this is something that's explicitly spelled out in the series as well in the 5th season. There's no reason, if you go back and watch that, it's all about people being experimented on. The first season, the first pilot, like I said, it's about kids being experimented on. And there's no trace. You don't see a gray, you don't see a UFO. I mean, you'll see some lights in the woods and so on, but that could be anything. That could be some sort of helicopter, it could be any, just something, special effects that they were putting on for the agent's benefit. So when you put it in that kind of context, and this is why the Scully character is so important too, because she ideally provides a very credible alternative explanation to what you're seeing. And there's this weird, and this cuts to the heart of the liminality. There's something that I've always noticed is that the most effective paranormal, supernatural, mystical, whatever kind of stories you're talking about, to me, the most effective ones are the ones that offer you, within the narrative, a very credible counter explanation to the paranormal, to the mystical, to the spiritual, to the supernatural, whatever. This a very strange power, and I think it is some sort of, I'm not exactly even sure how to explain it, but it's something that I've noticed, throughout all the things that I've read and watched and so on and so forth, that the best story, that's why the Scully character is so important to me, because she's the voice of the audience. And I believe Chris Carter said that. So that's when that liminality, and then it starts to break out of the screen, or it starts to break out of the confines of fictional content, right? It starts to, I don't want to use the word infect, because that sort of has a negative connotation to it, but it's, it starts to plant seeds in your mind. And that, again, that's why I think the show was so, I mean, there've been a bunch of shows in the past like the X-Files. The main example that people always cite is Kolchak the Night Stalker from the early 70s. But that didn't have a powerful counter argument to the paranormal. And that's why it didn't last long. And that's why it didn't have the effect, right? I mean, let's be frank here. I mean, it's also the chemistry between David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson, ironically, who hated each other's guts when they were making the show, but they had this incredible on-screen chemistry. But see, that's what it was really all about for me, is that when ideas break out of the confines of fiction, when they break out of the confines of entertainment, when they break out of the confines of like a weekly television show, and they start to plant seeds in the culture. And that is a formula that will never be replicated, I don't think. I don't think you'll ever see anything like that again. That paradigm shift that you're referring to really boils down to a bunch of really smart people who really did the reading, really did the research, and maybe did have this sort of sense that they didn't have the term for it. I don't know if they knew of the term hyperstition, but they were basically, it is a form of chaos magic, I think, ideally speaking.
In some ways, you could see the bicameral mind in both Mulder and Scully, right? You've got this sort of this guy going out there and trying to find the unknown, and then the grounding of the more rational in Scully. And the two of them together almost walk the audience up to the point of actually believing this stuff, because in a lot of ways at the end of the episode, Scully's explanations are kind of like too outside of the realm, and you're almost like yelling at her, can't you see, it's right in front of your face, you know? Meanwhile, you know, Mulder's out there getting kidnapped by Greys or whatever it is, and you don't know you know exactly how to get back to it. But you know, it's like a step-by-step process where the audience is then, you know, led to the conclusion that maybe there is something else out there, or maybe there is, but you're always left with that uncertainty because of those two characters and their reflective nature on each other.
Well, there's a very important concept here that I know. I mean, since I did work on the book and I read, you know, these hours of transcripts of interviews and so on with all the producers and writers and so on, they were very focused on point of view, like who is telling you the story. And really, everything you see on the screen is the result of an unreliable narrator. It's always from somebody's point of view, which is colored by their preconceptions, which is colored by their beliefs, which is colored by their prejudices. Okay. So that's something if you're going to do like a rewatch, you know, you're not watching a presentation of objective reality ever on that show. Okay. And very deliberately so. They always were presenting you, who is telling you this story? Is this Scully? Is this Mulder? Scully? Is this Scully? Is this Mulder? Is this somebody else? I mean, whose point of view is this story coming from? And one of the things that, I mean, one of the main sections in the book is my fan theory, my ultimate X-Files fan theory, and I'll share this now. I mean, I might as well just let this loose now. I have this fan theory that the X-Files is really about these two subjects of this vast, far-reaching mind control and eugenics program. Okay. And bear with me here. I've thought about this for a very long time. So really what Mulder and Scully are is that they're assassins. Okay. They're programmed assassins, and they're programmed with their particular point of view, with their particular prejudices, right? But there's this huge program, this post-war program, this eugenics program, you know, to create a slave race, to create super soldiers, you know, to create all these various subsets of humanity. And they were chosen because their families were both part of, you know, the military industrial complex. They were chosen, you know, not only to be these programmed assassins. So when they're hunting down these monsters and so on, really what they're hunting down are the rejects or the escapees from this genetic engineering program. And I mean, as crazy as that sounds to some people, there is an episode in that 2016 season called Founder's Mutation that basically kind of spells that out. And that was the episode. I mean, even though that series, miniseries, whatever, was pretty underwhelming, that episode blew my mind open, because I'm like, oh, there's the final puzzle. So you're not watching these two separate series where like there'll be the episodes with the UFO and alien conspiracy, and then you'll watch the episodes with like the monsters and so on. No, it's all the same story, because they're not aliens, they're not monsters as we understand them. It's all part of this genetics program. And Mulder and Scully are programmed to think that they're fighting monsters or they're chasing aliens or whatever, to assuage their consciences, so they can, you know, they can kill these poor creatures who are all part of this genetic horrific experimentation, you know, that started in the post-war with paperclip and all the rest of it. But at the same time, they're also being primed to create like children, you know, bear offspring for the new super race. Now, I spell this out in great detail because I can cite you chapter and verse in all the different episodes that bolster this theory. And like I said, in those first two episodes, you don't see aliens. Why would you believe in aliens? There's no sign of aliens anywhere. I mean, I don't think you even see actual like sort of gray aliens until the second season. And even then, you're not sure if it's a hallucination or not. And that's kind of the magic of the series as well. Now, if you go back and watch that with that in mind, you should also, read the book, so I can explain it to you, episode by episode. You'll suddenly realize that you're watching a completely different series than the one you thought you were. And again, granted, that is a theory, right? It's a fan theory, but I think it's pretty well supported by the evidence. So there you go.
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to bring up, like I did beforehand, my favorite episode. I have a bunch of favorite episodes, but it's from season 3, episode 20, the Jose Chung from Outer Space.
Oh yeah, see, there you go. That's the one.
And
that's exactly it.
That's the one.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
And it's got so many, exactly. So it's got so many layers in it. So I don't know if it's better for you to describe it, what's going on there, because you get everything. You get the 2 kids who are driving home after a date and they get confronted by a UFO. And then all you know is that they get home. They don't know how they got there. The girl has her clothes inside out. People are thinking it's date rape. And then all of a sudden the boy's like, no, that's not what happened. And then Mulder and Scully are being interviewed by Jose Chung, who's an actual writer in real life. And he wrote that episode, right? Is that
no? He's a fictional character.
I thought he was an actual writer. Okay, nice. Well, they got me.
Okay, but there are two different theories that I've heard. One is that he's based on John Keel.
That's actually what I've heard.
And the other one is that he's based on Whitley Strieber.
Nice. So, that's a good combination. But
take your pick.
Yeah, but for the episode and why it's exactly what you were just talking about is because you're getting now Mulder and Scully being interviewed by this writer who's trying to write this piece on aliens and different things, and they're trying to break down and understand if this was actually a terrible sexual encounter or if they actually were abducted by UFOs, or if it was the military-industrial complex who actually took them in for human experimentation and then did a psychological experiment on them that blanked out their memory, or actually it was all 3 and not the gray aliens, but different aliens were going on. So you get memory, you get these kids who actually have implanted memories of being abducted by gray aliens, and they both have similar but slightly different understandings of what that abduction happened. And as they're going through it, they're able to peer through, Mulder and Scully are able to peer through the actual layers of the abduction theory to see that it wasn't a gray alien, but it was the military-industrial complex psychotherapist who was putting them in a hypnotic trance to make them believe that it was an alien abduction. But by the end of it, you actually get to see this alien that was there on the outside. And it's so crazy. And you also get the Men in Black coming in. Just Even True, I think, is one of them, if I wasn't mistaken. Or
Alex
one of
Trebek, yeah.
And Alex, yeah, exactly. And so that's a perfect macrocosm to exactly what you were saying of the questioning of the question to try to get back to what the main theory was, that there were aliens involved, but not really. It was the military-industrial complex, and not really. The mind is so malleable, and I think that's one of the base theories of the X-Files is the malleability of the mind through paradigm shifts of consciousness and people trying to work on it. So that's my.
Well, I wonder sometimes if that's what, I don't like this term, but if that was like a revelation of the method X-Files episode, sort of spilling. This is what it's really about. It's about the military abducting people and hypnotizing them into believing they were taken by aliens and so on.
Yeah.
Which that episode is explicitly about. And there are hints of that, like I said, throughout the series. And like the first 2 episodes, I think you could plug that same interpretation into. So, that's a good one.
That's
and
a great
I recommend that everybody watch that.
And you also get the paranoia.
I'm just sort of talking up my hat about my fan theory. I think if you watch that, you'll see it pretty much play out there.
No, it plays out directly. You even get the paranoia of Mulder going into a coffee shop and eating pie and talking to this diner individual, and that whole thing you don't even know is real or not, because then you have other people going in there and trying to test the theory of Mulder. Did you actually go there? And they're continually going back to the writer and telling them the story. And it's one of the best episodes. Everyone go out there. Season 3, episode 20.
Yeah. Good for you, man. That's I'm glad you picked up on that. That's awesome.
Well, it's
You know,
interesting from the astrology of actually like when the season came out, it was during that like Neptune Uranus conjunction, as
Mhm.
well as like the Saturn square Pluto happening. So like Saturn's in Aquarius. And so when we think like last time, Saturn was in Aquarius recently was like COVID times, right? So it's interesting.
Mm.
Like the interesting thing about Saturn and Aquarius is it's like people want to belong to something, right? They want to be a part of something. And then just going back to like what you said about the show being able to just blast people to like the expansion, like that is like that Neptune Uranus thing. It's like, and it's in Capricorn. So Uranus was blasting open Saturn's world of materiality. And then you have Neptune giving us this like foggy, very like
Yeah.
non-grounded glimpse of the other. So it's interesting, like the way you described it is very much like I looked up the chart for when you said the show started. I
Well,
don't know the time exactly, but yeah.
well, I'm glad you brought that up too, because there's that whole idea. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Neptune sort of having a deceptive and duplicitous
Yep.
aspect to
Very
it as
foggy.
well. So I think that's there is an episode. They did do an episode on astrology. It's an episode called Syzygy, and it was about one of these where all the planets sort of line up, and this one particular town in New Hampshire, people just all started going crazy because of this conjunction. I mean, I don't know if that's grounded in real astrology personally, but I recommend you check out that episode and maybe get back to me and tell me if there's any sort of
Which one
real
was
life. It's called Syzygy, like the whole idea. Well, Syzygy, yeah.
I just found it. It's episode 13, season 3. We'll watch it.
Yeah. Definitely recommend that. So,
cool.
But and another interesting thing too is that so I talk about synchronicity, and there's an episode in the 9th season where Burt Reynolds plays God, right? But it is all about pattern recognition and synchronicity. And if you listen to the director's commentary, Chris Carter gives this whole commentary, but it almost sounds like he's like a Neoplatonist in some ways. I mean, it's like his whole, and it's almost like very medieval thinking as well too, because it's all about recognizing patterns, and that God is constantly presenting us with these sort of puzzles that we need to solve and everything like that, which is kind of the basis of what I've been doing for a number of years, that we're presented with all these puzzles that if we start to recognize the pattern, and that's explicitly in the dialogue too, it's like the winners recognize the patterns, they can sense the patterns, and they can work with the patterns, which to me is it's almost a synchromistic manifesto in some ways. So anyway,
well, in a lot of ways, the introduction of this strategic ambiguity that the X-Files was constantly harping on has been utilized to a great extent by actual policymakers within the government. If you know about Cass Sunstein and his
it's so funny you should bring that up. I was just reading about him yesterday. It's so weird. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Hey, synchromistic, right? But that idea of like injecting these new ideas into maybe problematic pattern noticers is sort of the entire presentation. And what a lot of people miss from that is his co-author is a one of these Jesuits, right? He's a Jesuit talking with Cass Sunstein about how we can cognitively infiltrate the conspiracy movement. And in a lot of ways, you can kind of play off of a lot of the themes in X-Files and say, well, what can we gain from this show that we can inject into the conspiracy community to maybe divert them off in different directions? And it's almost like it's a culmination of all of these different hyperstitions, and now they become the hyperstition magicians, putting out strategic ambiguity in all sort of walks of life, flooding the zone.
Well, I think Sunstein, I'm familiar with that whole idea, and there was a Pentagon paper that was released, the one that had like Penn and Teller on the cover of it or something. That's very boomer thinking. I don't like to sort of lapse into these sort of generational stereotypes, but it is very much like boomer thinking that
it's hard not to with the boomers. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you have this mainstream, right, and then you have this other mainstream. that you can infiltrate and manipulate the way they've infiltrated, manipulated the mainstream. Well, it's not like that anymore. There is no mainstream. There are thousands and thousands of streams. I mean, it looks like, let's call them capillaries, right? There is no main vein of conspiracy thinking anymore. It's this roiling and mutually hostile network of capillaries. Okay. And that's increasing. I mean, all you have to do is just go on Twitter. And I think that kind of like Cass Sunstein thinking is very archaic. And I don't think that it's really subscribed to anymore. There's certainly been attempts to sort of manipulate the alternative, the other mainstream, quote unquote, but it always fails because you've got groups of young people who have these mini micro cultures whose language and whose mode of thought and whose methods of communication are so arcane and so hyper specialized that you can't infiltrate that. It becomes like that meme, the Steve Buscemi meme, hello fellow kids, right? You can't infiltrate some Discord group with these extremely online kids who've been talking to each other exclusively for years, have their own vocabulary, their own modes of unconscious signaling even. You can't infiltrate that. You can't subvert that anymore. And I think that's really played into the, what I see is, we are in the middle of the fourth turning. And I think the X-Files in some ways, it was 30 years ago, right? But I think that it did sort of presage the fourth turning in a lot of ways. And the people who, I don't want to say they're in power, that's sort of a subjective term, but the people who grew up on the X-Files are the people who are moving into positions of influence in whatever field, or not. If they didn't grow up with the X-Files, they grew up in that same environment, right? And talking about people like Mark Dice and Alex Jones and so on. I mean, if you go back, I don't even know if you can even find this stuff because everything is disappearing from the internet these days. But a lot of quote unquote conspiracy sites, would use something like files. They're always trying to sort of get some of that glamour, right? Get some of that X-Files glamour for themselves. So they use like similar typography of fonts and so on, or, use the files in their name and everything like that. But that, again, that's archaic. That's already cycled out of the culture completely, I think.
You did mention some stuff about, I think you mentioned it earlier too. When it comes to like symbolism, you think that they use that a lot, actually. Do you want to give like some, I guess maybe some examples that you started maybe seeing it that gave you that idea?
Well, the symbolism that I have been really focused on, and ironically, it sort of led to this whole realization about like the fact that that's why I called the book XF Ultra, right? A little bit of a play on words there, because I could be wrong, maybe, but like I said, burying myself in this material for over 30 years now, I think that I've made my case. But the symbolism that I was always really interested in was from the mystery cults, Greco-Roman mystery cults. Now, the whole thing with like the abducted sister, and it's Orpheus and Eurydice. And then when Scully is abducted, they play that up. And the feature film, Fight the Future, it's even more explicit. Like Carter was really focused on this symbolism from the mystery cults. And there would be episodes that would be playing like on Demeter and Persephone, and so on. One episode, which is very hard to watch, called Oubliette, which is, it even ends on a river, you know what I mean? Like the river Styx. And so I've been writing about this for years, right? And then getting back to 2016, right? There's an episode called Babylon. And it's literally like Mulder takes mushrooms, even though they have to hedge it for the censors, right? But he takes mushrooms and he descends into the underworld, and he's on the river Styx, right? And, you know, with the damned and everything like that. And I remember watching it and thinking, oh God, Chris Carter wrote this for me. You know, like, I really did. I really thought that, because like I've been talking about all this symbolism, you know, particularly from Greco-Roman mystery cults. But it really began for me before I sort of realized the Greco mystery cults. There was a guy named David Flynn. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him. He was a Christian conspiracy researcher from the 90s. Passed away, I believe, in 2012, which is kind of ironic because he'd written a lot about 2012. But he had started this website in 1999 or no, it was 2000, called Having Mulder's Baby. And this whole thing was like this whole storyline, you know, Mulder's abducted and so on. And it's like Osiris and Isis and Horus and all that kind of thing. And you can even, I don't know if the website is still online, but you could probably find it on like Internet Wayback Machine. But I was waiting for years for him to follow up on him. Like, okay, well, you know, tell us more. Let's hear it. And he never followed up on it. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do it myself. So I went back and watched this whole thing where like they're playing off the whole thing with Set and Osiris and the birth of Horus and so on, and the wilderness and everything like that. And they follow that arc like rather closely. I mean, there's no exact symbolism. Like you don't see pyramids and all that kind of stuff, or whatever, you know, eyes of Ra, something, you know, there's none of that, but they're following the mythological arc very closely. Now, this has been done for thousands of years. I mean, this is as old as time, right? Just rewriting myths for your new myths or whatever, for your religion or for your stories. I mean, this is as old as time. But I was really, because I have like really serious OCD, I was just so hyper focused on the detail of it. And that again led me into this whole other, you know, the Greco-Roman mythology and so on and so forth. But there's also what they call Easter eggs. So they would insert a lot of symbols explicitly, and they'd even, on the official website back when it was running, would let you know what there were and so on. But I think a lot of that was sort of misdirection. But it's all to sort of hyperactivate a part of our imaginations, I guess you would say. And that to me fed into this liminal power, you know, of this hyperstitious power. Even though it's not like you'll see where, say like the Matrix films, where the symbolism is like bashing you over the head with a hammer and saying, look at us, aren't we clever? Look at our symbols, woo, right? And it's just so corny and cheesy, and it doesn't really land. I think when you have to go searching for it, or when you're sort of soaking it in unconsciously, that's when I think it really starts to embed itself into your unconscious mind.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot, because I like the idea. Well, as however old I was when that came out in 1999, I can't remember, but I remember watching it for the first time with my mom, and The Matrix. And it was one of those things for my teenage mind being bashed over the head, especially going back to the idea that you need to put yourself into imprint vulnerability for things to be able to take control and change. That I kind of needed that, because you question things and you have all the fantasy and the sci-fi as a kid you're reading, and it doesn't really lead you into this thing about like, what is the Matrix? You know, it's like something of the mind, and it's all around us, blah, blah, blah. You kind of need that. But it's not like it landed. And that's something I'm continually trying to tell people, is that you don't just take the red pill once and you're done. You need to continually embed these signs, symbols, myths into yourself. And then when you get into what you were just talking about, the deep mythologies of Osiris, Set battling, Horus, finally the battle, the Isis going out and doing the thing, and this going back through, and you get, you know, from the Mithric to Plato to the Orphic to now you're in the Enuma Elish and beyond. Like, that's how you really get the fine pin details, and your consciousness truly changes. And now you formulate a worldview. And then from that worldview, you can, I think personally, this is theory, my Brandon Lee theory, is that then now you can see magic in all things, because you're not just some automaton NPC Agent Smith at any time, and ideology can imprint you. And then now you're just spewing nonsense of left or right. But now you're actually able to see the narratives, because you can pick apart the deep underpinning of the myth, the magic, and the meaning of things. And so I just love what you were saying, because I think as much as I'm all like, you're right, it was bashing you over the head, and now look where they're at, and they're trying to change the red pill into some tranny porn. But the idea is that, you know, is like, it's like taking this terrible, like this beautiful thing. Even I like all three. I think I've heard you say you don't really like the other two. I don't know. You can.
I don't well, listen, I was a huge William Gibson fan. Okay?
Oh, yeah, me too. Okay. Nice.
Back in the 90s. And what they call the, what is it? The Sprawl trilogy, Neuromancer, Consiero, and Monolith.
Neuromancer's amazing. Neuromancer's amazing.
But also the Burning Chrome collection. So it's the absolute plagiarism of the Matrix is really, when I watched it, I was just, okay, I recognize that from this and recognize from that. And they even have, you know, Keanu Reeves, who was in Johnny Mnemonic, which is a terrible movie, but still pretty obvious, you know, hitting you on the head with that. But I was also, I'm still a very big fan of Dark City, which came out a year before. And Matrix sort of, I don't know how it happened. It might have just been coincidental, but the Matrix ends up recycling a lot of the ideas from Dark City, which I think is a vastly superior film. But I picked up on all the, you know, the queer theory stuff in the first Matrix, because.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty obvious. I know I did. I thought it was pretty blatant even then. And, you know, when
I didn't even know what that meant when I was that age. So there's that. Well, I'm in the middle of nowhere.
You know, and I was working in New York and so on for a number of years, and reading the Village Voice and New York Press. And so, you know, it's like I was sort of au fait with that whole mindset. Yeah. So I thought it was, you know, and what's her name? Carrie Lee. What's that actress's name? The one who played Trinity.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Carrie-Anne Moss.
Carrie-Anne Moss, you know, who's also in the only Christopher Nolan film that I really like, Memento.
Yeah.
Which it's funny, if you watch Memento, it's kind of like The Matrix in reverse, because The Matrix is all about like amnesis, like remembering. You know, it's about waking up and remembering, and Memento is about like forgetting and falling asleep. Think about that. Watch those two films together, you'll see in some very strange way they're like mirror images of each other. I don't know if that's intentional, but she has, you know, she has sort of like a very butch kind of presentation. But that all comes from Sally Shears in the William Gibson novels. Okay. So, and William Gibson's just completely, I mean, he's completely lost his mind over the past 10 years, 20 years or so. He hasn't written anything. He hasn't written anything since, I think the last thing I enjoyed by him was All Tomorrow's Parties. I read that other trilogy he did with like Spook Country and the rest of it, and I thought it was just insanely boring. Anyway, but that kind of ruined The Matrix for me, because I was too well versed in all the material that they were just completely plagiarizing.
Yeah, and then Grant Morrison's The Invisibles. Grant Morrison will always state
that.
Yeah,
you know, I never saw that. I don't see that. I think that's just Grant Morrison just trying to inject himself into a popular.
And I love The Invisibles. So I am an Invisibles stan, because it was part of my awakening with Promethea, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison side by side. So that was it. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
well,
that is interesting. Sorry, Chris.
Go ahead.
But it
I'm
is
sorry.
interesting about Grant Morrison inserting himself into popular culture, because that is like the most definitive example of hyperstition itself, by like narrating yourself to be involved in something that you weren't even necessarily part of, that you weren't necessarily even maybe he wasn't even famous around for that. So it is interesting to me that because he said it, people associate it with him, and then that is hyperstition, creating your own.
That's great marketing. That is great marketing.
Well, I'll tell you, I have a bit of a bone to pick with Grant Morrison, because I had written Our Gods Wear Spandex back in 2000. Well, it was published in 2007. I wrote it in 2005. And then he did that book, Super Gods, where he was basically, poaching on my land a bit. So I was, but I had written, there was this, so I was an associate editor on this magazine called Comic Book Artist back in the day. And I had written this editorial called Show Me the Magic, which had to do with, Grant Morrison and Alan Moore, because at that point in time, Promethea had just become what I call Theosophical Summer Camp, where it just become, it wasn't a story anymore. It was just like, oh, let's walk around through, the tarot and all the rest of it. And I just was so
until the last volume, Chris. The last volume showed the eminetizing of the eschaton through the imagination.
That is true. Yeah, but by then, it lost me. I just was like, I'm done. And believe me, I love Alan Moore. I think I think his masterwork, his true masterwork, is Providence.
Providence was amazing. For everyone who doesn't know, it's H.P. Lovecraft, Cthulhian Necromonicon. It's Providence was brilliant.
Very, very highly recommended.
But also will make you sick if you watch it. I just want everybody to know, as in, if you got a weak stomach, you might not want to read it.
Yeah, that's true too. But the Invisibles, what is that series even about, though? I mean, it's like love the Matrix or hate it. It has a central conceit.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. We're in the Matrix. We've got to get out of the Matrix. Yeah. But then we want to get back into the Matrix, because outside the Matrix sucks. Right. That's kind of the moral of the story. I mean,
right.
The Invisibles is basically about whatever book Grant Morrison was reading at the time. But one thing I did want to bring up, and just before I lose my train of thought on this, with the X-Files, what really I first started to notice was all the mushrooms and LSD and hallucinogens and iboga and so on in the storylines. And the thing that I began to notice is that they would either put either explicit or very thinly veiled symbolism about mushrooms, LSD, and all the rest of it in what they called the mythology, right? The stories about the alien colonization. Or they would have the episode before or after the stories about alien colonization have an explicit context with, like I said, iboga, mushrooms, and so on and so forth. And then they even did this one episode about iboga where they explicitly call out MK Ultra, right? But they also did another episode with, it's ibotenic acid. I believe that's the active ingredient in iboga, right? But
I think that's correct, actually.
Yeah, in the episode, it's mushrooms, so I'm not exactly sure what the context is there. But I started to just go back and realize that all the black oil is a hallucinogen mind control, basically trope. If you look at it in the context of the stories. And all the rest of it, I mean, the aliens themselves are mushrooms. Now that sounds like, oh my God, what is he talking about?
Very McKenna.
Yeah. Well, if you, again, read the book, I'll explain to you exactly why I believe that, that it is. Now, Chris Carter was a surfer in the 70s. Need I say more? I mean, what else do you need to say? And he's even mentioned that, there were he called them certain sacraments that needed to be observed. And also in between, I think it was the second and third season, he had gone to Sedona to attend a peyote ritual, which was then also written directly into the storyline. And he's never been shy about, that he based his stories on this experience he had at this Navajo peyote ritual. So there you go. So, but it all ties in. And, we were talking about the mystery cults. That's all based in hallucinogens. All the Isis and Osiris stuff is all hallucinogenic symbolism. We're seeing this in the news now, that the Eleusinian mysteries of Demeter and Persephone, the kykeon, as it's called, was actually a derivative of LSA, which is a precursor to LSD.
Yeah.
So
Wasson,
that's the
Road
realm.
to Eleusis, right?
What's that?
Road to Eleusis. Wasson's book is a great example of how that.
Yeah, I don't know. Carter never mentioned that book per se. He never. Okay. I've never seen him cite that book or cite Wasson's work. But then again, does he even have to? Because that stuff has been so embedded into the culture.
Yep.
Now, something you really have to be careful with. I am very much against the recreational use or the irresponsible use of hallucinogens and so on and so forth. And I'm very concerned about what I call MK Ultra 3.0, where, like, when you go to the emergency room, instead of giving you painkillers, they give you ketamine.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? There's ketamine centers all over the place now.
Yeah, that's concerning to me. And now there's like a new long-acting DMT.
Yeah, Brian Johnson and his whole nonsense that he's pushing for immortality and the nonsense that he does.
Yeah, listen, a lot of people don't want to hear it, but it's like, that's throughout history, that's how you encounter angels and devils.
Yeah.
Angels and demons, right? That's the medium. These various pharmaceutical, pharmacratic, hallucinogenic. So you have to be really careful. And I've studied the mystery cults, right? And the mystery cults were, most of them, there were the Bacchants and the Dionysus cult, which were just completely insane and completely off the wall. But like, Samothrace, Eleusis, they were very, very strict. You would have to fast and you would have to study, because what it was really about was preparing you, to meet the gods and not have a bad experience, where you end up meeting, the gods or the angels and not the demons, right? And that's really what it was all about. It was about learning to focus your mind, to fast, to purify yourself so you could enter into this realm. Now, that's something you have to be very careful about, because we're seeing it all the time, and we're seeing it like in this supercharged THC that's everywhere now, where you get these, you go to the gas station and get these, Delta 9 cubes that are 3,000 milligrams per gummy.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? That's,
and people are tripping balls because it changes into a psychedelic through your liver, but most people don't know that it becomes psychedelic compound.
Well, I full disclosure, I do take very small amounts of Delta 8s at night because I have a sleep disorder.
Guilty.
So full disclosure here, but I do have some. Well, it's like Delta 9, Delta 0, or Delta O, whatever, THCO, which actually I kind of liked, even though if you took a little too much of that, you'd be in real trouble. But they took it off the market, I believe. But anyhow, but that's the venue.
Yeah.
And people, when I bring this up, there are a lot of people whose like religion is the hallucinogen itself. And I'm like, no, you got to be careful. People have been telling you for thousands of years that this isn't a joke. This isn't a game. This isn't recreation. This is really serious. This is where you meet real entities, and real entities can enter into our world through you.
Yeah.
Through the use of these chemicals
and attach themselves to you.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, and I'm just seeing it more and more. One thing I will tell you is that the X-Files was originally canceled after the 9th season, but there were the plans to end the whole alien thing in the 9th season. And then in the 10th season, the stories would focus around evil as like a contagion. You know, it was basically about possession, entity possession. And they did a few episodes like that throughout the series. But I'm just seeing it more and more. You know, I'm seeing people behaving. Did you see that video of that woman who was stabbing that little kid in the parking lot? And you just saw the look on her face, and just like, that is flat out possession. That woman was possessed. And you just see this on an increasing basis. And gosh, do you think it has anything to do with, like, you know, all these drugs being mainstreamed and fed to people who are already on the edge, already on the borderline? So again, I get a lot of criticism because people think I'm just being puritanical. I'm not being puritanical.
No, I actually think you're totally nailing something, man. I actually think there's a lot of people that are out there strategically pushing mushrooms and certain drugs for a reason that's not for our benefit.
Yeah, no, it's not.
No, it's not. And that's not to say that there isn't potential benefits.
No, there is. Yes, I
from
agree.
mushrooms, so on and so forth. I mean, I'm not saying that, but nuance gets lost very quickly, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah.
Spiritualism
Yeah.
and partying, it could be a fine line sometimes too.
Oh, yeah.
The way it
And why they
is.
train you through the yogic structure, why in even magic you train to make sure your moral structures, your ethical structures, your body posture, your breathing, because anxiety, paranoia are the demons that we're talking about here. And those will take you over and then make
those
you
are
do crazy things.
Anxiety and paranoia and guilt are the catalyst
Yes,
for those negative influences, I think.
I agree.
Yeah.
No,
And then also, like, from like a Buddhist perspective, you know, when we look at even like the news, like we think people are going crazy, it's because they're literally inviting in these demons. Because in order for a demon to enter into your body, you have to believe in the energy that it is attracted to, right? So drugs maybe breaks people out of their emotional stability, but that's why I think like religion and spirituality and like me being a Buddhist is such an important thing to me, because it teaches you about emptiness of phenomena. Is like, we are all vessels, whether you want to believe it or not. You are a vessel for something. And it's better to be a vessel for like the highest power, right? So I think there's a mixture of like the drugs, but also like the news has gotten like hyped up. And then we have social media, which is like doubling down on that like crazy reality that people are buying into. And then just like, yeah, going out and doing crazy shit because they've invited in this energy by not having stability. So I think it is a mixture of like the drugs and the everything. But yeah.
Yeah, it's an assault. I think it's a coordinated assault on a wide scale. Now, one thing that I've talked about, I don't know if I talked about it in the book, but when I was a kid, I would get really, really high fevers and I would hallucinate. And I found out that high fever would trip the DMT circuit in your brain. So I had some pretty vivid and extreme hallucinations. And when I got a little older and started experimenting, quote unquote, I was like, yeah, I know this territory very well. You know, it was completely familiar to me. It was, people don't believe me when I say that, but you know, what am I going to do? I can't.
No. When I was younger, when I was a child, I ended up getting this fucking weird shit. I never heard of it before. It's like a crazy version of chickenpox, basically Katsaki. And I ended up with like 103 fever. I was fucking hallucinating. My mom took me to the fucking doctors. She's like, you know, fucking kids like asking me shit that's like there, you know, and it was because of the fevers. They were saying, they're like, yo, his fever's so high, this can actually happen. And I do see a correlation in what you're saying. Once I took other things, I was like, this doesn't seem like, I see a little bit of a correlation here.
Did you ever see the movie Jacob's Ladder?
Parts of it. I've never seen the whole thing.
Okay, I've watched that movie like over 100 times. Don't ask me what that says about me, but there is a whole sequence in there. I mean, so that is also an MK Ultra narrative, explicitly spelled out in the story, but it manifests itself where, you know, the Tim Robbins Jacob's Ladder character gets, you know, what you're talking about, a viral infection, and he gets like a super high fever, which, you know, I would get like 105, 106 all the time. And and that starts to play into this whole tableau where he's seeing, demons and so on everywhere he goes. That I can't recommend the film enough. It's not an easy watch. It's gruesomely violent in some places, but it was based on was it the Bardo? What is the Bardo? Help me out here, Kaiva. It's in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's, what is it? The Bardo Thadol?
The Bardo Thodos are the realms that you go into when you die, and you train yourself through the Tibetan Buddhist practices of the bone tradition to enter into these different phases. So if you actually go through and follow the light, you'll end up in this like red space, which actually is a bad space. But yeah,
Well, it can be Brandon. Not always. But yeah, we enter into the, you enter into the Bardo, you see the existence appearance, the emptiness, as Kaiva said, of phenomena, and you have to recognize it for what it really is, which is of course empty, but that's not how it appears to you. So the key to traversing the Mahasmashana, or the carnal ground of ultimate reality, is recognizing that emptiness is the quote unquote primordial truth, and that everything that arises before you is just like the kind of the aggregates of your own mind.
Yeah. Well, the film also explicitly ties that into medieval Christian mysticism concepts of purgatory. And there's actually there's actually a scene, where it spells like purgatory is the demons are really angels who are tearing away your attachments to life, right? I mean, that sounds very Buddhist to me as well, right? Like the whole idea of attachment, disattachment, and so on. So
there is a similarity, Chris, like to the kind of Catholic, like the more Catholic ideas of a kind of interstitial realm, like even Kaiva was saying before, like of Neptune, the smoky place. This makes complete sense in the tantric perspective, or tantric astrological perspective, because that is kind of like when the body's completely made dissolute, that would be kind of that Ketuvian or Neptunian, depending on your framing of like the outer three planets and their relationship with the Vedic astrology. But yeah, I think it's the same. It's like you're in this kind of interstitial zone. It's not destruction, and it's not creation. It's in between.
Well, when I think of Neptune too, I also think of Proteus, right? And the whole idea of like Protean, the original, and it's the abyss and the waters, but it's also shape-shifting, and at the same time it's also prophetic, right? Are you guys familiar with the god
Old Man of the Sea, right? Homer?
Yeah, the old man is exactly the old man of the sea. So but there is that whole idea of deception sort of almost being a mask for revelation.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
And that's something that you see throughout the X-Files, ironically.
Right.
And the other thing I should mention too is that Tim Robbins is the star of Jacob's Ladder, and the last person you see on screen in any X-Files episode, which is the 11th season, last episode, is his son, Miles Robbins, who plays Mulder and Scully's son, and he rises up out of the waters. And he is the new Proteus, because he's a shapeshifter as well, right? But he's also psychic. But he's prophetic, and I don't know. I mean, I wonder how much of that ties into what Kaiva was saying about the whole influence of Neptune on the pilot episode. I guess at that point it was 23 years earlier, right?
And it was conjunct Uranus too.
Yeah, I mean that seems like so Uranus is the sky, right?
And it breaks open things. So it's like as Uranus is like breaking open Saturn's world of like stability. Yeah, like Neptune's planting these like visions and ideas.
So it all plays in. I mean, Chris Carter again was well versed in ancient mythology, and there are explicit references to that. And he did write an episode about astrology. So I'm kind of wondering if he was kind of maybe aware of that. But one thing that Dean Hagelin, who plays one of the lone gunmen, if you guys want to talk about that lone gunman episode, it said that the CIA would have fortune tellers and astrologers at Hollywood parties back in the early 90s. And one of them, had said to Chris Carter when the show was being developed, this is going to be, it's going to be a huge success and all the rest of it. Kind of makes you wonder though, right? Well, one thing I try to impart to people, because there's this whole comes from that whole boomer conspiracy world. Oh, it's all distraction or whatever. It's like, no, these people really are true believers. I think there is, a grave misconception, and it's one of the things I write about, like I mentioned, my first novel, He Will Live Up in the Sky, is that I really wanted to impart to people that people who get involved in these kind of programs and stuff when it deals with the paranormal and so on and so forth are true believers. And I think that's become blatantly obvious now with this whole UFO disclosure runaround. I think, it's fairly obvious that, people like Jim Semivan and what's his name, Grush, and all these people who come out of the quote unquote intelligence community, they really are true believers. I don't think they're play acting. The more disturbing truth to me is that they really do believe all this stuff, lock, stock, and barrel. All this UFO lore that has been seeded into the culture by the military since the 1940s, and specifically the Navy. Talk about Neptune and Proteus, right? And that whole influence. There's that group Nightcap, which is explicitly cited in the X-Files episode. The executive committee were all Navy and Marine flag officers, which means commanders, commodores, admirals, generals, and so on and so forth. I think there is a misconception that these people aren't true believers, and I think that is a very, very dangerous belief.
Yeah, and that goes back to you talking about facing our delusions, like the Proteus and the Neptune and Uranus type of things, is that when we come up against our delusions, which is the same as Buddha coming in under the Bodhi tree, coming up against Mara and all the illusions of reality, of the illusion. And I think it's sometimes we think when we talk about illusions of reality, we always think external, when we should actually be thinking of these illusions are these internal aspects of how we use our perception to understand external events. And so it's such a fascinating thing. Jesus did it when he was, confronted with Satan on the Mount, and he had to go through the 3 trials. Buddha goes through the 3 trials. I feel like same thing we do when we're going up against our own delusions. When we take high dosages of entheogens, you go through that first ego death, and you are confronted with the great, guardian at the threshold. And I think that very much relates to alien disclosure, what the X-Files was constantly trying to ask us about our own paranoid schizo understanding about how these things are happening in the world, that we are deluded to think many things. And if we can calm those delusions and try to center ourselves through, practice of sorts, or understanding the synchromistic events of the external internal world as they happen, it's just funny how these things continue to spiral out and in together.
Well, I do use synchronicity as my yardstick.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just a very heightened awareness of deception and lies and misdirection and so on. But when things break that veil between the imaginal and the temporal, that is hard to manufacture. Okay. You can sort of create a counterfeit of it, which happens all the time. But I think that if you're rigorous in your approach to synchromysticism, it becomes like a great, BS detector, so to speak.
Yeah, and we spend most of our, and this is something that needs to be understood by the audience and many people around, is that the differentiation between understanding the idea that materiality created consciousness instead of how our physical bodies are tuning forks for consciousness. And then we switch our understanding. It's kind of like a Kantian Copernican revolution is where it's like, it seems to me that the idea realm was first created, and why we speak about Kabbalah and mysticism and magic, and then everything stems forth into materiality. And I think about it when we were talking is like, we spend most of our days in the ideal, or in the idea spheres, in the imaginal realms, in the imagination. We sleep more than we do anything else. And even when we're walking in the world, in the material world, we're sleepwalking through our reality. And so to think that materiality is more real than the idea spheres is kind of a diluted take, because of we are within the ideal realms at all times. And then to even say that, I am contradicting myself, because I think Cartesianism is one of the worst things to happen to us. And so the idea is that we need to merge these two things. And it's really hard because our language, which is magic, right? Even saying language is magic is getting us away from understanding that all language is metaphor. And so we can understand the metaphors of our own understanding, is that then we're understanding something where we're merging the body mind back together. And I think that's really important to understand then when disclosure happens, to not believe it. Doesn't say it's not happening, but to understand that if we read Jacques Vallée, Carl Jung, and the ancients and the modern and the mythologies of our past and present, that they're trying to tell us much of the same thing all the time, is that this is a remembering and you're waking up to something, and to stop sleepwalking through your reality. So that's...
Well, on that note, like you guys are talking about childhood fevers and talking about these psychedelic experiences, like these are all playing into the idea of the shamanic, right? And even the show is sort of like walking you through the dismembering of certain ideas that maybe the boomer generation had about the government and how they're all loving and all good and all caring. And so where does that integration start and stop as a societal level? We're sort of coming up to the point where all of these late 90s films of living in this sort of unreal world are now coming to fruition, right? So, you've got the Matrix movies about this unreal Matrix. You've got Dark City. All of these other things are talking about the unreal sort of taking precedent over the real and trying to find your way out through this maze. So at what point are we going to reach that sort of breaking point? Is it going to be a positive or a negative thing? Because we have
most people aren't. I mean, and increasingly, I mean, people are becoming semi-sentient on a societal scale. I don't know if you guys follow we've had thousands of teachers quit teaching because what they call Generation Alpha are uneducable, and they have no attention spans. They have no they have no inner dialogue, really. So I think that it's going to be, I don't want to say like a Dawn of the Dead situation, where we're dealing with masses of zombies and just a few sentient people. I hope we're not chased into extinction, because it will all fall apart. Then I think it's up to the individual. It's up to each individual to attend to their own enlightenment. You can't rely on systems anymore, particularly now, because all institutions have been infiltrated, subverted, and degraded, really. I mean, all our education system, our religious system, government, industry, across the board, right? Media, it's all been degraded. It's all been co-opted So we're not going to get our power from that. You know, you have to find it somewhere else. And discussions like this, I think, are a really important part of that. But just understand that you're almost sort of like putting a target on your forehead, because we're dealing with a growing mass of sleepwalkers who don't want to be awakened, who don't even know there is an awakened state, right? They're totally focused on the scrolling. They can't even focus on a half an hour television program anymore. Attention spans have been just completely shattered on a majority, I think, of the population. So you have to take responsibility for yourself. Yeah. And I think networking and coalescing and so on, while avoiding creating a new set of institutions, right? Because whenever you create a set of institutions, those institutions need to be maintained, right? And the people who are going to come to you to maintain those institutions are going to want to co-opt them and, you know, bring them into this hive mind that we're seeing built, okay, on an increasing basis. So it's a weird kind of dance, right? Where you need to, you can't do it alone. You can't work in isolation. But I do think that anytime a structure or a system is built, it will be either co-opted from within or destroyed from without.
Yeah.
I really honestly believe that.
No, I completely agree. And it makes me think of, and for me all the time, I'm always going back to it, but Plato's cave has been such a big idea for my own life and understanding, is that once you get out of the cave, right, it's just this very similar to the Matrix. You waking up from the Matrix, you go out there, you witness the forms, you do go back into the cave. And what Plato says is that when you go back into the cave, you will be mocked by those still shackled to the wall. And if upsetting them enough, you will be killed. And I think that's really important, knowing that. I'm not saying people are going to be physically killed here, but it's happening. But the idea that further goes is that you're not bringing the light back with you as you go in. You're not bringing the forms back in there as you go in. You are going in there to kind of do the thing, because the cave is this institutionalized world, the bureaucratic world. It is this, that even that we're doing right now, we're speaking, and then we speak in dialogue and dialectic. And, you know, really to me, you know, all of Plato's work is what he's trying to do is he's discussing the Orphic mystery traditions, the Pythagorean mystery traditions, and all the mystery traditions that he was a part of at that time frame. And upon doing so, he's teaching people how to philosophize. And that's why that's why for me and my work, I'm like, let's learn, kind of like what you're doing, Chris, is like, you're like, there's this synchromistic events going on. You're reframing people's understanding, how to make the connections between, as you're always talking about, the sirens and the sirens call and these things in our music, to then the X-Files and our modern myths of today. And when you can see those from a new perspective, instead of just recreationizing them, but seeing them as this grander cyclical pattern, then others can take up their own stand in their own agency in the world and start asking questions and then have the dialogue. Because I think that's something that we need to all get back to, which again, like you said, and I agree, panels like this and all the work that, you know, Greg Carlwood and all these different people are doing out in the world is really important, because without this, all people are getting is the modern mainstream media pandering back and forth between that Hegelian dialectic, because they don't want to teach people how to think for themselves.
It's worse than that, though, Nick. I'm almost nostalgic for that Hegelian dialectic. Excuse me just a moment.
Yeah.
What it is now is just cacophony. And it's a cacophony of completely untutored minds. Okay. I mean, just go on any social media platform. But there's also pseudo enlightenment and all the rest of it. And I think it just numbs people. It's numbing. I mean, I find it numbing sometimes. So like I said, I mean, you can't take responsibility for somebody else's enlightenment. You know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right?
Yeah.
Or you can't make them think, right?
Right.
But I think there are, you know, a number of people out there who you can reach. And like I said, you can coalesce with, while avoiding becoming an institution yourself, or building just another wall, building just another prison, which I believe all institutions eventually become. And it's the nature of the beast, because, you know, somebody has to sweep the floors, and somebody has to stuff the envelopes, and, you know, somebody has to do the spreadsheets and everything. And the people who do that quite often are people who are basically broken inside and want to use your structure, your institution, whatever you've built, to subvert it to their weird, suicidal, destructive, apocalyptic ends. And I realize that sounds a bit pessimistic in some ways, but hopefully we can learn, or we can develop technologies where these old institutional superstructures can become obsolete. Okay, and people.
Well, what's interesting about that is the Uranus and Taurus is now ending. So since 2018, Uranus and Taurus is breaking down tradition. So like since 2018, you can reflect on it, right? It's like 2018 till now, like we've seen so much just like opening up of like, you know, institutions that we used to trust, news stations, all these things. And now Uranus is moving into Gemini. So it is this time of like changing how we exchange information, changing how we learn things, breakthroughs in science and like humanity and connection, because Gemini is like the bridge between the black and the white. It's the depolarization of things. And so it might be interesting to see how it's going to be 8 years of it, right? So it's going to be like a progress of 8 years, just like we had a progress of 8 years till now, where we're like all the institutions that we once knew are now broken, right? Like the Uranus ripped shit up since 2018. So it will be interesting to see if like things, and that's where like directing is so important, because these people know these astrological transits, they use them, right? So you can use astrological transits to gear people to think a certain way. And I think that's where it's interesting, like when, you know, when we had, you know, Saturn in Aquarius and everybody wanted to belong, it was like the time of COVID, right? So it's like they pushed this like thing of like, you can belong to this group, you can belong to that group, and you can also be a non-vaxxer. That's also a group, right? Here's the groups that you can belong to because you want to belong. And so it's interesting how, that's what I always think about, is like, how can we gear people towards the good direction? But obviously I'm not influential enough to do that, but you know. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking about what you're saying about Saturn and Saturn eating its children, and I'm hearing more and more about these turbo cancers that increasingly younger people are dealing with. I certainly have my interpretation or my theory on why that is happening, but it's like the people who wanted to belong to that crusade, really what it was a moral panic crusade, are being eaten by it, literally eaten by it. But there's also, you didn't mention, was it Neptune and Aries, right? Did you mention?
Yeah, that's recently. Just Neptune moved into Aries just like a couple months ago.
Yeah, I did. I had a discussion with an astrologer named Noah Campbell. I don't know if you're familiar with Noah. We did a whole discussion on what that portends, you know, Neptune and Aries and so on. And it went, you know, it's gone from my mind because my brain just doesn't think that way. But if you want, I can send you a link to the discussion. Anyhow, we are on so many different levels. I mean, there are so many of these macro trends, or these huge forces, or these movements, or these alignments, or these conjunctions that are all happening now, right? They're all coming into play now. And what is that? Somebody had mentioned there's some sort of conjunction or something that hasn't happened since like the time of Christ. What was that? There's some major alignment or something.
It might have been like in a specific degree, because all the planets are going to interact within like 250 years, because that's kind of like the cycle of Pluto. That would be like the longest one. But it's going to be like in a sign. So maybe, I think it was maybe like the Neptune, Saturn. I could look it up in my my phone to see what that aspect would be. But there is like, they do interact all the time, but in a specific sign is sometimes what people get hyped about, because they're like, oh my gosh, this hasn't happened in this sign since, a long, long time ago. But I can look it up.
And then there's the houses and all the rest of it, and the decans. And I'm just so totally useless at astrology. I apologize. Anyhow.
Well, you brought up chronism, and I think the X-Files is a really good example of that. They're kind of the children of the FBI, and they're constantly being consumed by the government. They're constantly being, used for their intelligence gathering capability, and then sort of thrown to the side and used up. That's sort of like the same thing we see with, COVID and all the rest of these ideas, is that we get used for our resources and then sort of tossed to the side. And that's a cycle that we've only recently, in terms of American history, become aware of. We thought that, there was a reciprocal relationship going on here, but it seems like human resources are more and more used up and then tossed to the side, and then we get something else. You brought up naval intelligence, and this is like the original form of intelligence, right? And in multiple ways. But for society, like, you had to have this naval trade network that allowed for the the trade of goods across boundaries using the water as their medium. And what we see now going on with Iran is that the naval blockade is sort of the central focus of society, right? And if you think of water as some sort of a conscious energy, what we're seeing is now this blockade of consciousness, and everybody's sort of being diverted into this path of focusing on warfare, and how can we prop up this failing empire. And another way of putting naval intelligence is omphaloskepsis, right, which would be navel gazing. And this is kind of the naval intelligence that we have now, where all of these, people are just so hung up on themselves. Look at Pete Hegseth, there's not a thing that he could say that, he wouldn't love to hear out of himself. And the entire thing is sort of inwardly focused. And now we're seeing the Trump administration turn on their own supporters and not listening to anybody. It's kind of intensely focused on the self, while also being blind completely to what.
Well, I think a lot of that might be also, there's just so many psyops going on. I call it the psyop singularity. I don't know what is signal or noise anymore, but I wanted to just sort of just back up a bit to what you had said about, these systems sort of discarding people. I mentioned this before we started the show. My day job was, I was a freelancer for Marvel, and for 15 years for Marvel Studios. Now, I don't know if you've heard about this, but Disney, who owns Marvel, and that's a whole other story that we can maybe talk about one day, just basically fired everybody. So all the people who were making these movies, creating the concepts for these movies that were basically keeping the lights on in Hollywood. Hollywood is rapidly imploding. Were just unceremoniously let go. And where's the loyalty? These great artists, these great visualizers, these great conceptualists who earned billions of dollars for this company. It's like, sorry, goodbye. No gold watch. You're done. I'm sure a lot of them got good severance packages, but I had been aware of this back in 2020. Ironically, the last work I did for Marvel was right before the whole COVID thing, the shutdowns in March of 2020. I just finished my last job for Marvel just as that kicked in. and that was for the Eternals movie, and that was the movie that basically broke their backs. If you look,
that was god awful. That movie sucked.
Yeah, which is
and
kind
the
of
Eternals are so amazing. I love those comics.
It's funny though, because like when I first started with The Secret Sun, one of the earliest sort of mega threads that I had done on that blog was about the comic book, The Eternals. And
nice.
I should have known better. When I first heard we're going to do the Eternals, I was like, oh my God, this is great. And then of course I realized this is modern day Hollywood when they can't find their ass with both hands anymore. But I knew 6 years ago that it was over, because I had a different vantage point. Remember that scene in Mothman Prophecies where see that man up there cleaning the windows, if there's an accident down the street, he can see it. Doesn't make him God. It just means he has a different vantage point on what's going on. And a lot of people are like, oh, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, it's like, well, maybe I do know what I'm talking about because I worked for this company for 25 years. Maybe I have a little bit more insight than you do, Mr. Random Blogger, nowhere person. But anyhow, I mean, I knew that it was over, right? I knew that it was over because I wasn't getting the call. My phone wasn't ringing. They weren't, because there was no work to be done, because the canary in the coal mine for the collapse of the Marvel universe was the collapse of the work I was doing, which is licensing and merchandising for the films and so on. Because nobody wanted the toys anymore. No, kids did not want Eternals toys. I mean, you can still find them like, these closeout stores and everything. But that was, that to me reminds me of what Kai was talking about, because that's the whole woke thing. And that was, I don't know if that's Saturnian or Neptunian or whatever it is, but that was very much like, people wanted to jump on this bandwagon. They didn't realize that the bandwagon was headed for a cliff that they were all going to go over, which, is exactly what happened. So I'm not exactly sure what the astrology on that would be myself, but I saw it happen. And it's exactly, ties into what Kai was saying before. So anyhow, and of course now they, the same company, Disney, owns the X-Files. And they bought Fox, and they're doing this whole reboot that I know is just not going to fly. People have asked me about it. I'm just like, no, this is an exercise from the last regime, the Bob Iger regime. Hopefully, they won't do too much damage to the franchise, because I'd like people to continue buying my book. Anyhow.
Well, there's kind of a narrative chronism with the mouse just buying up all of these cultural, lexicons.
The vermin. Just think about that. The vermin consuming all the cheese, right? It's
wow. You just spoke Headless's language there.
What's that?
What's interesting is kind of Pluto in a way, like Pluto and Aquarius, right? Just kind of like, I don't know, when we think of Pluto, it is almost like the blowing up of culture, right? So maybe that is something, because we don't need it anymore, right? Like there is a healthy point of recognizing like, we don't really need that anymore. Like, do we want this to be a part of our culture? And maybe like these people, destroying it is like giving opportunity for new growth and culture that we need or something.
I totally agree. I mean, I'm very much against all these reboots and sequels and remakes and everything. It's like all these, Star Trek belongs to the 60s. Star Wars belongs to the 70s and 80s, right? Marvel belongs to the 60s, 70s, and 80s. These ideas, you can't just rip them out of the time period in which they were created and to the conditions and situations and realities that they spoke to, and just expect, we'll give them a modern gloss and it'll be business as usual. It doesn't work that way. Mythology is not forever. This is something that I very strongly believe, is that myths are part of the worlds in which they arise. Okay. Now, there are universal ideas and concepts and impulses beneath those myths. But I'm talking about the structure, the outer shell of the myth is created for particular people in particular times. Okay. They're not just, it's not like, like a widget. You can just change it out, right? You can just put a coat of paint on it and resell it. It doesn't work that way. All right. It's
the changing of the aeons is the term that a lot of people use, and I really like to use. And Jin is huge on this kind of movement as well, is that you move through the aeon of Osiris and the rising and the dying god. Aeon of Horus is breaking things through. I know that's very Crowley, but there's more than that. Aeon the daughter is Jin is so elegantly is trying to put into the Hyperborean mythos of things. And so I think it's interesting. And I myself am trying to push the Aeon of anime weebdom, because I find that the East and Japan, South Korea, China are the anime. That's the new modern myth. And even Jim Lee has come out and said anime is crushing us, manga is crushing us right now, because they're actually not being pushed by a woke agenda. They're coming up with new ideas that are still hitting on old Shinto or old Japanese or even old Western alchemical and all these different mythologies of the West, but they're doing it in a new way that's capturing the attention of the youth. And don't get me wrong, the first thing a lot of people think of when they think of anime is that weeb style of all the more lewd things that you get, but there are brilliant, beautiful changing of how to take a modern individual who suffers and bring them into the wider scheme of things so they can transcend their lower states and reach higher divine states through suffering and that passion, and through trying to the old Bushido code that I will die daily. And upon doing so, I will alchemize myself and transcend my current state to be the highest individual that I can and bring my friends along with me.
Well, that's what all heroic myths are supposed to be about.
Supposed to be.
Going back to the Greeks, these self-sacrificing individuals who suffer for the rest of us, put themselves on the line. And that's the basis of all heroic mythology. I think that we've lost that in many, many important ways. And this whole mythology where 95-pound 15-year-old girls can beat up a squad of Navy
Ring of Power,
SEALs.
right? Is that Ring of Power?
It's not based in reality. And another thing that I talk about all the time, people have probably heard me say this, is that I think CGI killed the magic of the movies. Right? I think that when you look at CGI, no matter how beautiful it is, there's something in your mind's eye that realizes that it has no atomic reality. It's just pure electrons. Now you go back to movies that I grew up on, right? And you see some of the like in-camera puppetry and all these kind of effects and miniatures and everything. Some of it can seem pretty laughable now, but you didn't think that. I mean, it used to be going to the movies was like going to temple, it was like stepping into this temple of the mind, of the imagination. And I think that CGI broke that pact with us, I remember seeing the first Blade Runner when it came out, the weekend it came out. And I was basically a religious experience for me. And all those miniatures of the city and all the rest of it, and the spaceships flying around and everything going on in that movie, people might look at it now and think, well, yeah, it's a little dated. I didn't think that. I was like, I am in that reality like you would not believe. I'm 16 years old. Actually, no, it's still 15. My mind is still just totally pumped and primed for this, right? To step into this other world. And what was the other film? Oh, this is good. Nobody's heard of this movie, but when me and my friends were kids, we were all just total delinquents, and we used to have this thing where like, let's get as high as we can before we sneak into the movies. And there was this movie that nobody's ever heard of. You can probably look it up. It's called Rock and Rule, 1983. Don Bluth animation film.
Oh, wow.
when I went back and looked at it, it just looked ridiculous to me. But my brain's in that state. I was in it. I was in that world. I entered into that world, and I cannot remember the last time I had that experience at the movies. And I think CGI has a lot to do with that. It doesn't capture you, because somewhere it's unreal. So that's sort of I don't know what that has to do with the X-Files. Well, I'll tell you exactly what it has to do with the X-Files. I did not like the first feature film at all. It took, what made the X-Files magic was the intimacy of it. It was very intimate. It's this intimate relationship between this man and this woman, suffering and struggling in the dark, out away from the public eye. And when there's giant spaceships and buildings blowing up and all the rest of it, that broke that compact of intimacy. I don't know how to explain it, to give you an effective metaphor for that, but it's like when your favorite band becomes popular because they change their style, right? They sell out. I kind of felt like, the X-Files kind of sold out for that movie. I mean, I love the second movie, which everybody seems to hate, but that's a whole other discussion. Anyhow, any other questions?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, anybody have any other questions before we start to wrap it up?
Well, I just want to say that I loved what Kaiva said, and thank you, Brandon, for shouting out Aeon of the Daughter. Of course, that's like such a seminal part of my whole project. Thank you. But I think what Kaiva said about Pluto was really on point, especially in regards to Aeon of the Daughter, because even though most astrologers think of Pluto as like just strictly a purely destructive force, I think there's actually a lot of resolution of paradox that happens, especially if you're comparing it to Uranus. It opens the gate, you could say, for a new paradigm, rather than just destroys the old, which is what both Pluto and Uranus can do. But I think Pluto actually allows for a kind of recreation of the not the past, not a return in like an Evolian sense, but perhaps maybe something new, a progressive Aeon. And not in the political sense, but just something like a way to move forward in with the movement of the cosmos or samsara, rather than be referential to like a mythical, as I call it, we was kings past.
All of nature is renewed by fire, right? That's the meaning of INRI.
Nice.
It's a Roman saying. So destruction is an important part of new creation. You have to clear away the old. And I think that is why our culture is so dead, because we won't let go of the X-Files. We won't let go of Star Trek. We won't let go of Star Wars. We won't let go of Superman and Batman and the X-Men. All these just archaic, anachronistic ideas from a completely different world, a completely different reality. We can't let go of them, right? I mean, the corporations can't let go of them because they don't have anything new to replace them with. And the fans are so emotionally invested in these characters, they have to die. They can't just be the Walking Dead forever. And again, I'm totally against this whole of anybody doing like a new X-Files series. It's like, no, that belongs to the 90s. Let it go. Leave it in the past, right? We have to have like new stories to tell each other. If we just keep telling each other the same stories, I mean, that's why things are just so depressing and static. I'm consider myself incredibly blessed to be like this weirdo kid who lived for pop culture when, in the 70s and 80s, right? When things were new and exciting all the time. And it was like new ideas coming, like I said, being 15 years old, going to see Blade Runner, being 10 years old and going to see the first Star Wars movie. It's just like, you can't replicate that. It's like, stop chasing that dragon. It really is an addiction. It's like, you'll never equal that first high. You'll never equal that first rush that you got from seeing Star Wars or whatever film. I don't know the answer to it. And I just, unfortunately, I think the economics of it don't pan out anymore. I mean, I know a lot of people are very down on AI, and I completely understand why. But I think the only hope is somebody in there, some kid in their basement, tapped into whatever Claude, I don't even know, whatever animation AI, and having something new to say. That's the only way out of this mess. We have to let all these old stories die because they are smothering us. They're smothering us. To me, it does feel very Saturnian. It is a very like Saturnian energy, just like pinning you down in place, right? And just sort of smacking you around. We have to let go of that. We need fresh ideas and fresh energies. And we certainly need them more than just pop culture. We need them in our government, in our institutions, in our economics, and all the rest of it. We need like truly new ideas. Like socialism is not a new idea. It's actually a very, very ancient idea. Ancient Sumer was actually a communist state. It was a communist theocracy. Those aren't new ideas. We need like real new ideas and fresh thinking.
Well, that's what's nice about Uranus and Gemini coming up next, not this Saturday, but next Saturday. Uranus moves into Gemini. Because Gemini is also economics. It's the marketplace, right? So Gemini is the marketplace, exchanging of ideas. So we can probably see like all those things you're describing. It's like, that's a fun thing about astrology. It's like, we all crave it. And then it comes because it's like, that's the process. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the 8 years.
They're also the gates to heaven, right? Boaz and Jachin, Gemini, it's at the crossroads of the ecliptic and the celestial plane, right? And that's, you enter in through Gemini, Auriga, Sun at Auriga, Perseus, up to heaven, up to Cepheus, right? And that we can maybe do a show on this, my interpretation of what the whole 9/11 mega ritual is really about.
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm in. Let's do that.
I'll have to read in on that because it's all celestial. It all has to do with the Watchers. That's another thing that I've talked quite a lot about, Watcher cults, fallen angels, restoring the fallen angels to heaven, and so on and so forth. So, but Gemini is the gateway. It's you ascend up the celestial plane, like I said, through Auriga and Perseus and Cassiopeia and Andromeda and Pegasus and so on and so forth. But then you're at Cepheus, but that becomes the war in heaven between Draco and Cepheus, right? Don't get me started on that. We'll never get out of here.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, man. That was like an awesome discussion. It was a lot deeper than I expected. Oh yeah, no, that was great stuff. Before we let you plug everything that you got, we'll have everybody else just remind everybody where you can find all their amazing work. Kaiva, please let everybody know where they can find your stuff one more time.
Yes, this was a lovely conversation. You can find me at 11kaivarose33.com. You can also find me at Kaiva Rose, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And I also have new ideas because I have my books. So I'm a young adult author. So Rue Odyssey is my fantasy series. And it's mystical, it's magical, it's steampunk. It has ancient wisdom thrown in there as well. So it's fantastic and fun. And there's part 1 and 2, and I'm writing part 3 right now. So yes, thanks for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you for making it. I appreciate it. And Headless Giant, my man, what is going on, sir?
You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube at the Headless Giant, and also on Rumble. So go subscribe over to Rumble if you haven't yet. I need to get those numbers up. And check me out on Sunday morning at 10:30 Central. We're going to be doing a live trialogues with Ethan Indigo, Ricardo Calvario, and I'm going to be down there near, Madison, Wisconsin, doing a live with Ricardo. So it's going to be awesome. Check it out.
Wild. Very good. Very good. And Jin the Ninja, what is going on, sir?
What is up, boss? Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you, Chris. It was great to speak to you again after, I think it's been like a year and a half to 2 years. So honestly, it was really like it was very cool, and I appreciate it. And of course to Kaiva, and I'm looking forward to our conversation in the future, and hopefully we'll talk about your books as well. And of course, Brandon Lee, my brother from Mercury, on Monday nights, we have been doing this Gonzo radio thing. You can also check me out at Threshold Saints and the Grey Lodge, which is our group show. All speculative Kabbalah, speculative Kalachakra, and speculative Gnosticism. So we do Friday night Gnostic Mass. And then also, follow me on Twitter at Wukong Reborn, WUKONG Reborn. That's my big account, but you can also follow the show on IG and X Twitter at Threshold Saints. So thank you guys so much. It was, I don't know that I have seen a lot of X-Files, but I honestly don't remember. But what I found interesting was really the sort of depth and contours of this conversation. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Well, my book is available on Kindle too. If you don't want to take the plunge for the full ride, again, it's going to show up backwards, but XF Ultra, The X-Files, Conspiracy Culture, and the National Security State. And it's everything that we've discussed and so much more.
Oh yeah, it's
go into the mechanics and the history of the national security state post-war, human experimentation, and also the whole UFO situation as well, which is seems to be perpetual these days. We're looking down the barrel of Disclosure Day coming out. Soon,
yeah.
right? So
Gray's gonna save us all.
Which it seems to me like it's I call it Close Encounters of the Third Kind with major depressive disorder. I got from it.
I like that. And Brandon, let everybody know what's up with you, man. Please.
Thank you, Nick. As always proud to be a reject of the occult, a reject of the rejects. Can't even help it. That's just how it goes. Chris, this was fantastic. I've been wanting to talk to you for a very long time. Obviously, I'm going to ask you, please come on my show. I would love to interview you and put all your work out there for everyone to see. So I would love that.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Beautiful. Awesome. Everyone head over to Magus in the Media on YouTube, subscribe, like, and share. I got merch dropping. It's on the web. It's out there. Do you want this logo? Do you want to wear it on all your garb? I know you do. Head over to Magus in the Media. Check me out on X, Instagram, and the like. Jin the Ninja and me on Monday evenings. It's been fantastic. For some reason, if you want to listen to us for 2 to 3 hours, jabber on about certain topics, that's what we do. Ethan Indigo and I just did a show. We're both Tai Chi martial art practitioners. We did part one. We're going to do part 2 next week. And then we're going to talk about the Tao the following week, most likely. Coming up on my show, I'm dropping a Sarah Jane's Dream Mysteries interview that I just did. We went deep for a few hours. It was fantastic. The great Gordon White is coming on at the end of the month, which I'm really excited to chat with him because I, like you, Chris, like Greg, I've been listening to you guys for years, and it's kind of like talking to the people that have helped also not just mold, but people that I'm like, oh my God, other people think like I do. Thank fucking heavens. As well as there's a book, it's called Black Pilgrimage. David Beth, he's the publisher. He owns the publishing company Theon Press. He's coming on and I'm going to be dropping that. That book is fantastic. So yeah, everyone just head on over there. That's my shtick. Again, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Nick. And again, everyone out there, subscribe, like, and share to all of these people. Head over to Kaiva Rose 1133. She's the best astrologer out there. Book yourself with her if you want to figure out how your life works in the grand majesty of this celestial. There we go.
Oh yeah, thank you very much, Brandon. And Chris, please remind everybody where they can find all your great stuff.
Okay, secretsun.blogspot.com is the old war horse. Then the Secret Sun substack.com. I'm going to be changing the address for that soon to secretsun.blog, but for now you can find it at thesecretsun.blog. I mean, I've been on the internet forever, so I'm pretty easy to find.
Yeah, even if you just put his name in, shit will pop up.
Yeah, and I look forward to interacting with the folks out there.
Well, thank you very much, man. This was really an awesome episode. I really had a great talk. And like I said, it went in other directions I didn't expect, and I thought it was awesome. Really love to get you on again, and finally happy we finally did. It's been a while. I've wanted to get you on the show. So
well, let's pencil in a September appearance for my 9/11.
Definitely down for that.
We're at the 25th year, so
Ooh, 25th
we can do a
anniversary.
25th anniversary, and
Awesome.
I'll walk everyone through, because once you see the correspondences, you'll realize that something much different than you've been told by anyone was going on that day.
Ooh, very interested. Very interested. Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah. Again, thank you everybody for making the show too, and everybody in the chat. Howard, that is what's up, man. Thank you very much. And that's where we go live. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.